Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us, which will be hopefully a fascinating conversation. My name is Brendan Toohey. I'm the co-founder and president of PeacePlayers. From our organization's starts almost 20 years ago, we've prioritized working with and advocating for girls and young women, recognizing the barriers that they face in comparison to their male counterparts. We are really pleased today to have a fantastic group of panelists. Jackie Alemany, a Washington Post journalist, and more importantly, a former college basketball captain, will moderate the conversation. Jackie has spent time with PeacePlayers. She knows several of the panelists and can also speak to her own personal transformation through playing sports. During the second part of the conversation, we will hear from members of our leadership development team, programs from across the globe, and we'll also invite you to submit your own questions through the chat function. Without further ado, please welcome Jackie.
Hey everyone, thanks so much for joining us today. We really appreciate your time, especially on the day after Equal Pay Day and during Women's Month. I hope you're all celebrating it every day, but really every day of the year, not just this month. But I wanted to introduce our standout panelists. Thank you all for taking the time. We have people all across the world right now in all different time zones. We've got Chinny in Baltimore. She's a program manager. She started her basketball career at Duval Senior High School in Maryland. Welcome, Chinny.
Good morning. Yes, thank you.
We have Tando, our PeacePlayers South Africa operations manager, and Leadership Academy Steering Committee member and longtime PeacePlayers participant, zooming in from South Africa. Where are you in South Africa right now exactly, Tando?
I'm in Durban.
Welcome. What time is it?
Hello,
there?
everyone.
And we've got Julie Younes, former director of measurement and evaluation at PeacePlayers, who's now at Social Impact as a senior technical specialist. Welcome, Julie.
Hey, everyone. Hi, Jackie.
And then lastly, we have Megan Bartlett. She spent most of her career working in designing and advocating for programs that use sports to promote youth development and positively impact communities. Welcome so much, Megan. Thanks for joining us. Thanks to all of you for taking the time out of your day.
Glad to be here.
And if I can just, before we get into things, as you know, when you first speak, if you could just say your full name, just a reminder to everyone. So I feel like some people sometimes on Zoom are, just want to tune into the programming, so they put it on in their car. Just say your full name, and let's get right into the conversation. And I just want to say, PeacePlayers really is the perfect organization to be facilitating this conversation. As most of you know, they use the power of sport to educate and inspire young people around the world, particularly in communities that experience conflict. And also, as I think a lot of us on this Zoom are a little bit biased towards elevating women. That is a huge goal of PeacePlayers, encouraging young girls to get involved with sports for the first times, breaking barriers in a lot of their communities where it's not necessarily the norm for women to be playing sports and getting out there in a leadership position. So I want to start off with everyone just going around and in just a few words, telling me what Women's Month means to you. Chinny, why don't we start with you? I'm going to put you on the spot.
Absolutely. My name is Chinny Nwadwo, and a little bit more about me. I played professionally all over the world for 11 years as a professional basketball player. But what does Women's Month mean to me? It means a lot. It means empowerment. It means phenomenalism. It means perseverance. It's a symbolization of hope, right? It's the existence that change is inevitable if women and men around the world continue to fight and advocate for women's rights. That's what Women's Month means for me. So I'll pass it along.
Okay, I'm Nolutando Msweli from South Africa. I'm the operations manager for PPISA. For me, it means celebrating women, showing off the achievements, showing off the accomplishments, showing off what we normally don't see on a normal basis. So as much as women should be celebrated more, it's great to have a month that really, really showcases the talent and the accomplishment of women also inspiring other females who are watching, and also just instilling knowledge in those who don't know. So that's what it means for me.
Megan, why don't you go ahead?
Sure, yeah. I think for me, both of what Ginny and Tondo said were great, but I think for me, it actually means like 11/12ths worth of work to do. So, 1 month is great. And I think we have a far way to go to make sure that we're doing the same kind of celebrating of women that we do in this month every day of the year.
Yeah, no, I'll just chime in. I think a lot of what I was thinking has been said, but just to go on Tondo's note about celebration. So that's the first thing that I think about. I mean, I was first introduced to or really thought about International Women's Day about a decade ago. So an organization I was working with in Senegal had a really huge celebration for International Women's Day. Festival, parade, band, music, and I had never seen anything like that before. We don't really do that in the US. And it was kind of the first time I thought, wow, like, we're really celebrating women, we're really kind of lifting them up. So for me, it really strongly resonates with that, but then also kind of having that moment to have these sorts of conversations where we're thinking about kind of where are we in terms of gender equity and kind of where do we need to go. So it's both that celebration, as sort of has been captured by what everyone said, it's sort of that celebration as well as reflection moment.
And it does leave me with a good opportunity to thank you all for your efforts. I should note, athletes have long been influential leaders in the fight for social justice and equality, from a very local level, community, grassroots level, to a national level. We saw Megan Rapinoe visit the White House and Capitol Hill yesterday and call for equal pay, excoriate the NCAA for their inequitable treatment of women. And now we're seeing Congress open up an investigation into the treatment that I'm sure you've all seen that's gone viral on the internet. But for people who aren't necessarily on the U.S. women's national team yet, how do you all recommend that they could get involved with tackling issues of gender discrimination on a daily basis? And we're not going to do every question with everyone answering, but I do feel like these are questions right now that I really do want to hear from all of you and from all of your unique different purviews.
I'll go, Jackie, Nolatando again. For me, I think how you carry yourself and how you stand for yourself in the confidence that you have in what you believe in kind of trickles onto other people. For example, if you're in a space where there's a lot of discrimination and you stand for what you believe in and you fight for what you believe in, somewhere, somehow, it's going to make a difference to someone. And from there, it's going to trickle to another person. So I think we need to be bold and confident in everything that we do. And we need to be confident in what we believe in and what we want to achieve. And we shouldn't be scared or apologetic about it. And I think having that kind of confidence will show to other people,
Tondo, well said. This is Shane Longbow. Very well said, and I agree. And I think something that's really tangible is just using your platform, right? For example, when you see these types of articles, you can use your platform to post these types of articles and get this discussion going. I remember I posted the NCAA video on my network, and a guy replied, "Oh, I feel really sorry for women's sports." I said, don't feel sorry for women's sports. There's nothing to fear. What we need to do is, when you're in a room and you hear someone talking bad about women's sports or women in general, advocate for them, right? If you really want to make the change, be the change that you wish to see. And that's from the male's perspective. And just like Tondo said, from a female's perspective, we can walk out in confidence and we can continue to use our platforms in a way that doesn't just uplift us, but it uplifts other women as well. And it goes deeper, right? There's so many other things that we can do. There's so many places that we need to start, but starting with yourself, I think, is the most important thing, really. It's really imperative in the movement for women's rights and equality for women.
Yeah, this is Juliana. Just to kind of build on that, one thing that and it's a very small thing, but one thing that I've tried to become more aware of and do in recent years is to actually talk to my female kind of colleagues and peers, and males as well, about what they make. I think earlier kind of in my career, it was more of a taboo discussion. You didn't really talk about salaries. And I think what ended up happening a lot of times is that, certain people were making more. And I've been in cases where, males, there might've been different kind of pay structures, but nobody knew because nobody was talking about it. So having more of those conversations, direct conversations, even if it feels awkward, I think, obviously people make different things and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But I think it's hard to tackle these issues if we're not aware and we don't talk about it. So just trying to do that kind of small thing has been a behavior that I'm slowly trying to change.
Yeah, I just have to add on to that, Julie. I feel like I had my own experience recently where women bend over backwards to seem amenable or easy to work with. And I feel like sometimes you learn the hard way that you just need to explicitly state and stand for what you want and need, and take no less than that.
Yeah.
Even if it means you're standing by yourself.
Yeah. And I've also been surprised. I feel like I thought it was going to be awkward, and then the people I ended up asking and talking to about it felt less awkward about it than I did. So I ended up being pleasantly surprised that, these are conversations that people want to have, for the most part. And so it's just a matter of kind of doing it.
I think,
I have just one thought. I think the way folks are talking about transparency and the way folks are talking about advocacy is so important. And it just makes me think, though, about what PeacePlayers does so well, which is get female role models into the lives of younger females who need them. And so if the women who are doing these things, having these conversations, advocating from their platforms, doing all the sort of message sharing, are also spending time with the next generation of young girls, then they're just going to think it's normal to do that, and not something that you have to sort of go outside yourself or like take on the way Julie's taken on those difficult conversations. All the girls that Julie mentors are going to think that's normal. And I think that's really a beautiful part of what PeacePlayers is doing in all over the world, and what more women can get involved in and be a coach, be out there with girls who need you.
And Chinny, you had briefly touched on this, but I want to get to the topic of men. How important is getting buy-in from the men around us? I interviewed Draymond Green yesterday, who has been a big advocate, or I guess a big opponent of the NCAA, but a big advocate of female basketball players. And he said that, the NBA was once a money pit, and that same kind of investment is needed in the WNBA in order for women, the playing field to be leveled and for women to reach that level of profits and success. How important is male buy-in? And I'm curious if you have any explicit personal examples of men who have been resistant to your view of the world, and haven't been as open and progressive, and how you've dealt with that.
That's Chinny here. Brilliant question. Loaded, but brilliant. And it's kind of what Megan said, right? We're talking about representation, right? We need the women to be out there to represent, so girls can say, oh, this is normal. This is actually something that I can do. And so it's the same thing here, right? It's a two-way street. There needs to be representation from men. Men need to be in position to advocate for those women when they're not in the room. They need to be in position to advocate for women when they see other men who are talking poorly about women's sports. And we're talking about sports, but women in general. And so the push to have men at the forefront of pushing women is very, very, very important. Personally, there have been many situations that I, as a professional athlete or just an athlete in general or woman, have had to really stand for it with men who are posed questions like, being a professional athlete, they'd be like, do you guys even get paid? Like, what? Those types of questions, as if the sport is completely different now that women are playing it. And so having to just be that voice to advocate for women has been something that I've done all my life, all my career. But yes, it's very, very important. It's so important for men to be on board, because we're talking about power dynamics, right? They have it. They are the ones who are leading in that role. And all we're asking is to be treated equally, right? And to be able to share that power dynamic, to be able to uplift women, because it's just, it's the way it should be. And so without going on a tangent, I think that men have to be at the forefront of this movement. It's not women against men, it's men and women together, moving women in the direction that we should be moving in the first place.
And maybe even it's beyond advocating. It's really examining your own power and standing out and getting yourself out of the way. right?
Absolutely.
4 women coaches in the WNBA, 12 teams. That, to me, that's 8 men on notice. So I think it's advocating together and also being willing to say, you know what, I'm in the wrong spot.
Creating those opportunities for women. Absolutely, Megan.
Yeah, this is Julie. So I know social media isn't always the best example, but I always tell people, if you ever have questions about, where we are in terms of sexism and misogyny, go follow the Bleacher Report, which I'm sure many of you all do, and look at the comments whenever they post anything about the WNBA or women's sports in general. It's pretty shocking. But I think, again, social media isn't always a good reflection, but I think it does show kind of where we are in a lot of ways. And so kind of going back to the question of male athletes and celebrities who have, in recent years kind of been coming to more women's basketball games, been kind of speaking up. I think they have an influence in those kinds of spaces. And so having them speak out is going to make an impact in a way that, a video or a photo of a WNBA player isn't right now. So it's important to have that kind of support from those players.
What Julie said, I just read an article yesterday that highlighted that for the NBA, the first all broadcast female was on. And for me, that was shocking because in this era, it should have been done a long time ago. So I think also it involves the big organizations that are run by men. It takes them to take the first stand and to kind of implement these things for the actual players and other people to just also get into that stream. So I think it's important for those big organizations to get into promoting women and equity in gender. So yeah.
Tanda, while I have you, a question for you, because I think obviously in the US, there is congressional legislation and local and state changes that are sort of in the works that could potentially provide women with equal pay or more equitable treatment. But I'm wondering, in South Africa, what is that landscape right now? And are government changes possible? Are they in the works? Could they actually help women? Can you give us an update on what's going on in your countries?
I'm going to speak on South Africa. In South Africa, there are different policies, legislations that have been rolled out for gender equity, but they are just legislations. When you look deeply into it, there's no implementation or the rollout of those legislations in practice. So it's like it's been done just because it has to be done in this democratic era, but there's no actual implementation and there's no measures of what the actual policy does. So in essence, it's null and void, and I think we're also oppressed with cultural barriers that prevent men from looking at things holistically, but they'll focus more on culture rather than progression of South African citizens as a whole. So yeah, that's where we are.
And I'd love to hear a personal experience of discrimination.
I think my discrimination is unique in the sense that you can't look at genderism without, in my case, looking at racism because they're intertwined, right? So I'll give you an example. In high school, we were reigning national champions, state champions 2 years in a row. And the boys who hadn't won at all, they would get all the better gear, right? They had the support. They get the better gear. They had the better time of play. They would play at 7 p.m. prime time, and we would play at 9 p.m. And we'd already established ourselves. So that's one. And then one where it's coupled with racism and genderism is having played international. There was a team I played for, and racism, it was racially motivated, but also I was discriminated because I was a woman. There was a coach that called me out of my name and spat at me. So those types of things happen. But what do? We persevere. We keep going. You don't let those types of things deter you from your purpose and what you can do to advocate. And I keep saying the word advocate because essentially that is what it is. Like, you have to get out there and do the work. And like Megan said, you have to make sure that you're surrounded with people who can edify you, right? People who can support you and people who can hold you accountable so that you can continue to do the work. So you don't, when there is trauma and discrimination, fall back and become small in the presence of it. So there are many, many examples that I can give you, but what do I do, or what do I do personally? I keep going. And what can I pay it? How do I pay it forward? I make sure that I instill that in my programming, my curriculum, in my girls. Anytime I'm somewhere where there is a girl that is looking at me, I am letting her know how phenomenal she is, and how that's only going to get better, and how she needs to go out and continue to believe in herself, right? We're creating mantras. We're creating a space where self-talk is extremely positive, right? You don't need people to cheer for you if you're cheering for yourself, and moving in that direction. So I'm really passionate about that, but I think trauma for me has pushed me and given me that sense of empowerment to move forward, because someone sees me, they just don't see me in the right way. They're going to see me in the right way at some point. So, yeah.
And, I read a statistic yesterday that I thought was worth noting in your comment on, the intersectionality of sexism and racism. The gender gap has obviously narrowed, I think, by about 17% in recent years. Women are still paid 17% less than men, but Black women are still paid only 63 cents for every dollar paid to white men, and Latino women are only paid 55 cents for every dollar paid to white men. That's lower than, I think, the 82 cents or something white women are paid to men. So it's a really good point, Ginny, that I think we all need to remind everyone of all the time. And along with your point about mentorship, in sharing your anecdotes, I'm curious, how essential a mentor or another woman or someone, a leadership figure, was to you to overcome this adversity.
Huge, right? Because again, I have a male mentor and he is white. And what happens there is that he, believe it or not, it's going to sound odd, but he creates the opportunities. Like, he helps me get the opportunities because he includes me in the conversations that I would necessarily not be included in. And so that's what it's so important. It's so important to, on both scales. So when we have this conversation and we're talking about women's rights, I also have to, take a step back and think about what that looks for a Black woman, because then there's organizations that say, oh no, we have the representation of women, but then they're all white. And there's no one that looks like me. There's no representation there. So having a mentor is huge. I try to surround myself with at least one or two. And believe it or not, sometimes it's harder for me to get a woman as a mentor than it is for me to get a man as a mentor. And that is just the reality of it. And so that's what I mean. It needs to start with us. We need to walk out in confidence and understand that we're not just, it sucks that we have to represent every woman every single time we step into a room, but that's the position that we're in. And we need to hold on to that and really walk in faith and have power in that position instead of feeling small. So, yeah. Megan, you want to say something?
No, I was just thinking of when you were talking about your discrimination, the one that sort of always comes so clearly into my brain, makes me feel like I'm 1,000 years old, but it wasn't that long ago, truly. When I studied abroad in college, I studied in Scotland, and I got there and I was like, great, their spring season is when they play soccer. I'm a soccer player, sorry, basketball folks. But I had just had my season, and then I show up in Scotland and I get a sort of bonus season, and I'm really excited about it. And I get to the first practice and it's being coached by a man on the men's team. Not by a coach, by a man on the men's team, right? That sounds like it should have happened in the 1950s. I swear it wasn't the 1950s, but I was like, this is not okay, right? Like, this is just so not what we do. And so what we did was I said to the rest of the women, we don't need him. Like, if they're not going to give us a coach, like, we'll coach ourselves. We don't need him. And so we went into the athletic director's office and said, no, thank you. We'll coach ourselves. What do we need to do? Like, what is this guy hypothetically responsible for? Because we'll take that on. And that's what we did. And, I don't think that's like, it was so obvious and so blatant that, for the rest of my career, there have been so many more insidious examples of things like what Julie's talking about, being underpaid, being told I'm too emotional, being told, I'm all these things that sort of are not maybe as blatant as being coached by a man on the men's team. But I think they come in packages big and small. And to Chinny's point, you need a combination of people who are willing to say, we can do it ourselves, we don't need that. And people who are willing to say, put their arms out and say, come in here where you wouldn't be invited otherwise.
Megan just reminded me of a traumatic story that I experienced. I also played soccer, and I was scouted by a team which happened to have a male coach. And at that time, I had braids on my hair. So the first day of practice, when I came to practice, he told me, "Oh, you look too glamorous for practice." And mind you, I had no jewelry, no makeup, just braids. The next practice, I came with a different hairstyle, and I was acting very feminine compared to all the other players. And he strictly came up to me and he's like, "Do not act so girly. This is a masculine sport. And it's about high time you cut your hair." That was when I was like, no, that's not gonna happen. I expressed myself at that moment. I had that confidence at that age to express to him that, no, this is not how you're supposed to be treating someone. You don't base sport off of how someone looks. You nurture the talent and you harness the talent, and that's it. And I think at that moment, he told me I was very, very emotional. So from there, I made a decision to take myself out of that environment because it wasn't conducive for me. It was very toxic and it was going to have a very negative outcome for me. So I took myself out of that environment, but I expressed myself before I took myself out of that environment. And I also, I encouraged other girls to have confidence, to speak out and express themselves, because it was going to continue on and on and on. And that shouldn't be how things are. So I think that was a very traumatic experience for me.
Well, and I'm wondering, Tando, though, what gave you the confidence to?
I was already in PeacePlayers by then. I'd already been part of the leadership development program at PeacePlayers. And there are a lot of life skill lessons that they taught us during that period. And also just having a different mindset, believing in what you believe in and stand in your ground. Don't let people deter you from what you believe in just because they don't understand or they are not knowledgeable or they're ignorant about something. Stand for what you believe in, continue advocating for it, no matter in which sphere. I've been doing it in sports, in corporate, everywhere I go. So I think that's the confidence I gained from PeacePlayers also.
All right, Jewel, your pressure's on you.
Yeah, well, I actually just want to loop back to, there was a mention about mentors and the importance of mentors, and that kind of made me think, I think what's helpful with mentors is that, sometimes you get stuck in habits and you don't think to do things differently or act differently until someone kind of reminds you. So the example that came to mind is when I was talking earlier about starting to have conversations more about salary. It was actually what spurred that. I think some of you know Amy Selko, so she worked for PeacePlayers as well and was someone that is kind of a mentor to me. And one day, casually offhand, she said, "Oh yeah, I have those conversations with people," and then I was kind of like, "Whoa, why don't I do that?" So maybe not meaningful to her, but it changed a lot for me. So I think just having someone that can get you to think differently is really important, and is a really big role for kind of a mentor.
Guys, we only have a few minutes before we're going to have to get to the Q&A. But I do have a lot more questions for you that I do want to try to get through. So if everyone can try to be as succinct as possible, I would appreciate it. But Tando, you remind me of, I've got to ask the key question about how is PeacePlayers contributing to equality as a nonprofit? You state that PeacePlayers gave you the confidence and the skills to handle a sexist coach. What other ways, in your opinions, have you seen PeacePlayers contribute to equality, either in your own life or the lives of all of the people and the young girls that you guys have already touched? Oh, you're on mute.
Thank you for that. As you all know, we use the power of sport to unite, educate, and inspire young people. So through our program and our core values, which is seeing people as people, inside out transformation and culture of collaboration, we instill certain knowledge and certain skills in our kids. We use a number of tools to equip them with dealing with life, not only just basketball, but we tackle things holistically. So you get a child that's coming to play basketball, but they have a very, very, very bad background. There's a lot of issues at home, and this is where it's a safe space for them to express themselves and speak and do what. And we use that to teach kids a lot of skills and instill a lot of knowledge to change the way that they think. Hence why we deal with a lot of kids from different communities, because in South Africa, you know, of the racial divides, and we use our program to bring all those kids together and kind of change the way they think and see each other, and kind of just erase the institutionalized oppression that's been instilled in us for many, many years. So as Peace Players, we tackle those issues by bringing people together, because you can say you're advocating for equality by not doing anything. But as soon as you bring people together, that's where you're more impactful. And if you measure your success by the way that they think at the end of the program, have they influenced other people in their sphere of influence? Have they trickled how they think onto their parents? You know, it's all about that.
Although Peace Players, I love that there's a little bit of a trickle up effect.
Yeah, there is. Definitely.
Jackie, just want to add, if I can put on my kind of monitoring evaluation hat for a second. Sorry. This is Julie. So I think one thing that Peace Players does really well, that especially in comparison to, say, other programs, is that the staff really thinks intentionally about all the things outside of the actual program activities. And I think I mentioned this earlier in terms of kind of the parents, the family, what's going on in the community, how are people getting to and from. So I, actually before this was just kind of working on, just completed this study for work on youth engagement in programs in Jordan. So across different sectors, civic, democracy and governance, education, employment. And, one of the big findings was there were really a lot of barriers to women's participation or to young women's participation around kind of, my family doesn't support me doing this kind of program. Certain areas of study are not considered appropriate for women. We're not safe going to and from the site. And so I think, a lot of programs don't necessarily, they're focused on the activities and what kind of we're doing once we're at the program site. But I think what Peace Players does, particularly, speaking to my experience working in the Middle East program, is really thinking about engaging with families, really thinking about where are activities located? Can girls get to those places? Is it safe? What time, are these activities happening? Can people go back and forth, if it's not too late at night, things like that. So kind of taking the whole environment of participation into account rather than just participation itself, I think is really key to kind of how Peace Players does things.
I'd love to see that study if it's allowed to.
It's coming.
Ginny, go ahead.
Okay, yes. I think they've all said it quite well and eloquently. We do the research, right? We don't just, we're on the court, but it's far beyond the court. And we looked at the history of the cities that we're in and the people that we're dealing with. We invest in the people. And we invest in them in a way that it's not just the programming on the court, right? It's far deeper than that. And I think Tondo and Julie have both said that in a way that I don't want to take away from it, but that's exactly what we do. It's brilliant. It's amazing. I'm a newbie, so I'm a rookie here. And I was like, I'm always blown away when we create these things and I understand what it is, because just being a professional basketball player is one thing, right? Using your platform and to see the world in this way, but then being able to step outside it and see sports for social good, for social justice, for social change is huge, and that's what Peace Players does. So I'm just happy to be on board, honestly.
I think I'm here to, this is Megan again, as a non-Peace player, as being able to see the Sport for Development field from outside. I think I'm here to say that what PeacePlayers does really well is the women on this panel and all of their colleagues who are out there setting the example. So the coaches they hire, the coaches they put in front of young people, the women who are in leadership positions, they're walking the walk as much as they're talking the talk.
Yeah, props to Brendan for bringing at least me in. Thank you, white man. But I do feel like I've sort of, I have not stressed enough or touted enough the accomplishments of the women on this call. Rivka, you reminded me of, she's a professional basketball player. Everyone should know that. So all of you don't hesitate about bragging on yourself. But really quick, in a sentence, I'm wondering how you all stay motivated before we get to our other questions from the LDP and other people on the call. How you all stay motivated when you feel like your efforts and the long, fight towards social justice are plateauing or falling short?
I can speak on behalf of myself. So I'm Nigerian American, and I'm the first generation in America. And as a woman, I just think about, I am, and I said this to someone the other day, I may stand here alone, but I am a representation of many. And so when things are not going right, they're just not going right in the moment. And the fight is an upward hill battle, right? And you cannot allow, small things to deter you from the path. And so I'm very highly motivated. I'm passionate about the work I do, and I make sure that I put myself in position to be passionate and have energy. And despite the outcome, continue to praise the effort and the process, because eventually great things come if you just stay steadfast in your belief. And that's what I try to instill in myself and all the young girls that I work with. And I'm so happy to be surrounded with women who kind of have that same mentality. So that's what I have.
I need like a voice memo from you every day.
In
the morning.
Yeah, she's like,
don't ask for something, because I will send it to you. I will send it to you. Yes, no, absolutely. Yes.
I think for me, there's a Zulu proverb that I always go back to. It says, "No mungawa, vugu ixoxo." So it just means even if you fall down, no matter how many times you fall down, you get up and be even greater. So in whatever you do, you're going to fail. You're going to make mistakes, but learn from those mistakes, learn the lessons that you're required to learn, and then get back up even bigger and greater. So, yeah.
I would love, Tanjo, if you could share that in the Zoom chat after the panel. If you could write that out to everyone, it would be awesome.
And teach me how to say it too. That was beautiful.
Okay, start there. Okay.
I think for me, what keeps me going is the other badass women in my life.
Yeah, this is Julie. I think just kind of round this off, for me, I'm lucky enough in my kind of life and work as well to be regularly coming into contact with, the kids from the PeacePlayers Middle East program, or, people that have taken part in education or kind of other programs that I've worked with. And that is motivating for me, seeing a kid. I have lots of stories, particularly when I was a fellow at PeacePlayers Middle East, of girls that I worked with that were in the locker room crying the first activity because they were so scared, and then by the end they're really excited to play basketball, to be kind of on a team with girls from a different group than they are. So those kinds of coming into contact with people and kind of seeing those changes is motivating.
Awesome. And not to be totally cliche or corny, but it is really interactions, discussions, conversations like this that I feel like keep me going, are a breath of fresh air, provide perspective and inspiration. And just hearing you guys, it's like getting me pumped up. So thank you for all of your thoughtful insights. Okay, we're going to get to some questions from our LDP participants. First, we're going to go to Yale. And you have asked, as women who play sports competitively, how are we influencing the fight for gender equality in that regard? Who wants to take that? Oh, hey, how are you?
Good, thank you.
Do you want to go ahead and ask yourself?
What? I didn't. I wanted to ask, you talked about it a little bit, but I wanted to ask, what do you think as women who play sports competitively is our influence for the fight for gender equality.
Who wants to take that? Well, she had asked the great question. I don't know if she's on, but she had asked the great question on how is women being exposed to competitive sports at a young age impactful for the trajectory of their lives? I see you nodding, Julie.
Well, I was actually thinking about Megan with this question, because so what immediately came to mind is just how kind of the high dropout rates of women, and I feel like Megan has more to say about this, but just the high dropout rates, and that if we're kind of getting girls exposed to sports and active at a young age, and then kind of putting the supports around them, so that, you know, when they hit those dropout points at middle school, that they're kind of, you know, protected from the things that normally cause them to drop out, that we're, you know, building all the things that we know is good about sports. But yeah, Megan, do you, I actually was nodding more thinking about you and some of your work around this.
No, I think you nailed it, Julie. I think the idea of, you know, why is it beneficial for girls at younger ages to be in sport, is that hopefully the earlier they start, the longer they'll stay, which we know to be true. And if they stay, then they have the opportunity to be exposed to these incredible role models. They have the opportunity to get all the benefits of positive relationships with adults, with peers, the opportunity to have all the benefits of from physical activity for sort of their physical health, their mental health, their resiliency, and all the other sort of social and emotional outcomes that we know young people can learn through sport when sport's done right. So it's so beneficial for girls to be part of the sport experience for all of those things. And with the major caveat that we have to do exactly what Julie said, support them and make sure they stay and make sure it's an environment that's for them, and not just relying on the sort of norms around what sport has always been, because sport was created by men for men. And we need to think about how we need to listen to girls and create environments that they want to be in, that they want their sport to look like.
And actually, I have to follow up with a question of my own, because I was reading an interview with an old colleague of mine yesterday who said that Gayle King once sent her an email, and she didn't encouraging her and just complimenting her on her work. And Gayle King probably didn't realize it, but it had a huge impact on her career and her confidence. And she made the point that a lot of the times women don't even realize that they're being mentors, but there are so many little ways that they can. I'm wondering if you guys have little ways that you want to share with everyone on, you know, how you keep encouraging people. And maybe that might not even be intuitive to us, especially as you noted, Chinny, you know, maybe sometimes female mentors might be hard to come by. What are ways that we can all better that skill?
I think at the most rudimentary level is a mom who supports her daughter in sports. I think at the most rudimentary level, it's encouraging a young woman when you have the opportunity to encourage that young woman. I think what Megan said was amazing and brilliant. And statistically, we know that if girls who develop these core characteristics and develop this confidence take these elements with them as they age, they're going to be very successful women. Most women who are in CEO positions, presidents, those women have had exposure to sports. And so I think it's just something as significant as encouraging another woman, encouraging a young girl. And those are small, tangible things. Those are small things that we can do every single day that helps young girls build their confidence, moving them from competent to confidence. And confidence, I think, is at the core of everything in terms of developing women in sports, developing young girls in sports, and having them stay with the sport as they move along. So I would say that.
I think what we know about girls is that they're socialized to focus on being perfect. They're socialized to not do things unless they know they'll be successful at them. And sport is this incredible opportunity to overcome that, to get used to trying new things, to get the opportunity to fall down and get back up. And so building on what Chini's saying about confidence, for me, it's about courage, right? It's about being brave and not perfect. And how do we as coaches or parents or mentors in every part of our lives encourage women to be brave and not perfect?
Megan, I'm sorry. It's amazing that you said that. And I'm thinking of effort praise, right? Boys get a lot of effort praise. And so boys get this thing where they get their power from the process, and girls get a lot of outcome praise. Oh, you're so pretty. Oh, you're so beautiful. Oh, you got A's. And if we can shift the narrative to effort praise for girls, and we're praising the process. So when things don't go the way they'd like to, when they are trying these new sports, they can understand that the process, if they keep with the process, things get better. If they keep with the process, they'll be able to define who they are. If they keep with the process, this will become enjoyable. And so, yeah, I agree with you 100%.
What about you, Julie?
Yeah, I think one thing I started to realize recently is that I'm no longer kind of in my early 20s starting off my career. I guess I knew that, but what I mean by that is that I think I have a little bit more power than I used to in terms of opportunities that I can provide for other people. And so one thing I'm trying to become more conscious of is, I lead a lot of evaluations or studies. And so I can, if I have people who are kind of younger, entry-level women who might not get certain opportunities to do things, I have the ability to kind of give them work on my studies that I'm leading, give them, certain parts of things that they might not be assigned to by the company, but that I have the ability, and it's a very small thing, but just kind of that I have the ability to, to provide opportunities to people and trying to use that more than to use that more and more.
Tando, anything that you do that you feel like is a small but helpful thing? I think
the biggest thing that I learned as a mentor is to always create a safe space for kids in terms of them speaking and expressing to you, or just having that safe space to confide in you, to speak about their mental state, the emotional state, because as much as we can look at the sport aspect of everything, being a mentor is holistic. So you need to be able to tackle everything holistically, not only looking at the opportunities you can focus on, but also how to change someone's mindset, how to counsel someone at certain times, how to assist them in whatever they're going through. I think it's just a holistic thing that we need to keep in mind,
And someone on Facebook asked this, and it was a question I have, and I think it's really important. But the idea of dismantling these rigid concepts of masculinity, how do we do that through the way that we coach our boys, right? Because it's not just the women here, but someone on Facebook had also asked, what I find shocking is the misogynistic behaviors instilled in young women's minds. I feel like things are all sort of interconnected. How do we fix that? How are you guys coaching your boys?
Yeah, Jackie, I just really quickly, because I was thinking about that as Tando was talking. So I had a really interesting experience a few years ago. A friend of mine and I coached a middle school boys team in DC for a few years. And it was actually my first time coaching boys. I had only really worked with girls teams before that. It was really interesting. And I think I took two things from it. One is that for most of those boys, I was the first time they had seen a female who could play basketball. And that in itself was funny to see the reaction to that. And, I'm sure they were exposed to kind of other females and female athletes, but just seeing a female that was actually teaching them skills was a change for a lot of them. And then another thing that we emphasized a lot in our coaching was, thinking about kind of how we treat each other and our emotions and teamwork and, things that aren't always emphasized with boys. So, for example, one thing that we used to do that was so funny to see the evolution of this throughout the season. So at the end of every practice, we had the boys come together in a circle and they had to give 2 claps So they had to kind of call out a teammate who they saw hustle for a rebound or, you know, do a great job making layups, you know, and improving that skill from last week. And then everyone kind of give that person 2 claps. So kind of going around calling out effort from teammates. And so in the beginning it was like, oh, this is so corny. I can't believe it. You know, we don't want to do this. And then by the end of the season, they were like running to the kind of mid-court to start that at the end of practice. And it was everyone's kind of favorite thing to do. So just, I think boys want that kind of, those kinds of activities, but they're just not given them a lot, I think. So the more that we can do that and bring that into sports and other aspects of life, I think is helpful.
Your future wives will thank you for teaching them how to communicate. Megan, I heard you're a real, go ahead, Tanda.
Oh, no, I just wanted to say also for life skills is very important. I think in my experience, I've had a number of discussions that have evoked certain emotions or certain thoughts, and it gave us an opportunity to see how kids really, really thought and what they perceived, what they believed in. And I think those discussions, having those discussions where it's either you speaking of gender equity, gender equality, sexuality or whatever, we want to see how kids really think so we know how to tackle changing their mindsets. You know, I think also it's important with boys to have those discussions so you know where their mind is and how you can tackle change, you know, in them. So yeah.
I don't know exactly what the sport equivalent of this is, but I think it's an important thing for us all to be thinking about is that the most effective gender violence programs don't target women to try to not get raped, right? They target men to not be rapists. So I think there's something in this about how do we make sure that men see this as their problem. And not just a problem that a bunch of women talk about on a panel, that this is something that they are actively engaged in looking for solutions to. We often ask girls to solve this problem, and that's, you know, we want to hear their voices, we want to hear what they want, we want to elevate their leadership, but we also need to be posing the same questions to boys.
I also think that, I think that was great. I also think it's moving away from the fact that we are terming masculinity and femininity. They don't have genders. There are no genders for masculinity and femininity. And we're always talking about, well, girls shouldn't do, but there's no gender with those. There's no genders applied with those. And if we can continue to see masculinity and femininity independent of gender, I think that helps with the lens that we approach and coach our boys with. We always talk about having programs at the very rudimentary level for girls, but we need to have programs with the lens for boys to see girls as their equals. And so I think that is at the root of a lot of the change in how we have to begin to approach the whole talk when we talk about masculinity and femininity. It's, you know, it's another conversation for another day, but I always go back and forth with this one. I'm just, well, where's the gender implied? You know, I've always felt that I have firm in my masculinity and my femininity. There's no, you know, I didn't know that it applied to me just because, I mean, I just don't think that it should be linked to gender at all. So there's that.
The mistake that we make as coaches, I've witnessed this, is that we coach girls and boys differently. When you come to a practice, you say boys 20 suicides, girls 10 suicides. It should be the same. And that decreases the competitiveness in girls. And there was a point where I watched a team where the girls were practicing softer than the boys. And when they got to another school, they were trashed because the girls were as competitive and as strong as the boys because they coached in the same way. And I think that's really, really important. And don't differentiate based off of gender, you know? I think that's the mistake that most coaches make.
I'm gonna go to our last question from AJ McMinn in Northern Ireland. AJ, do you wanna hop on real quick?
Hello. So my question is, I'm a woman in sport. I study sport in university. That's my degree. I have grew up in sport. And you guys have talked a lot about like kind of your motivation, but what is like one thing you'll say to a young girl that's struggling through adversity in sport, whether it's comments from males, self-doubt, like what is one thing you'd wish you could say to a female, like a young girl coming up through sport?
Chinny, let's start with you. Words of wisdom.
You're on mute. Yeah. Sorry about that. That is a very good question. I mean, as you can see, I'm about the energy and all that good stuff in between, but I would say believe in yourself. I know that's very cliche, but it is the exact thing that I would say. It's the exact thing that I say to myself on a daily basis. Believe in yourself, believe in yourself. You have all the tools inside you to be phenomenal. You have all the tools inside you that make you capable. You have all the tools inside you that should move you into a room, into a space with confidence. Believe in yourself. I know that's short and sweet, but that's exactly what I would say. And I would continue to say that over and over and over again, so much so that it became her mantra and what she, that's so she believed in herself. Sorry, excuse me. Because someone said that to me. Someone lit that fire in me and it's never been turned off. So that's what I would say.
Chinny, I think you took one of mine. I also think that it's important to believe in yourself and also be confident in yourself and what you believe in, and put in the hard work and fill those spaces that you think you can't fill those spaces, and be bold and strong in what you do. You know, I'd say that.
Megan, go ahead.
So I already said mine. For me, it all comes down to be brave. Don't be perfect.
I'm going to put it in mine too, because I don't want to close this out. I want someone more inspirational to speak, but I feel like my biggest issue is sometimes I feel like I'm hustling, and I'm not really seeing the result I want to be seeing. So I just always am reminding myself to keep at it. It will in some way pay off, whether it's, you know, a visible or tangible thing, or maybe it's a little more subtle and helping the people around me. Just keep at it.
I guess my thought is just about kind of surrounding yourself with the right people. And if you're hearing sort of negative feedback or criticism of what you're doing, then you're probably not around the right people, and maybe don't have the right, or need to seek out different support structures. Because when I think about what's been helpful for me at different steps, it's been the support structures and the environment, the sport and non-sport environments that I've been in. So trying to seek those out.
We have run over our time. I just really couldn't stop the conversation because it was so thoughtful and insightful. You know, I encourage all of you to reach out to us if you ever need a mentor or having a bad day, need some advice. We're all on social media, and never hesitate to reach out. Thank you all, my brilliant panelists, for your time and insights and your preparation, and for all of the work that you do to make women's lives and boys' lives, men's lives better around the world. Thank you so much for joining us all today, everyone. And thank you to PeacePlayers. You guys just do the best work. It's an honor to be associated with you all.
Thank you very much, Jen.
Thank you.
Thank you.